Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1137 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. Welcome to the world of One Piece, where mystery is stacked on top of mystery. The giants straight up do not make any sense. I mean, I'm sure that they do make sense. There's a plan here, like, Otis thought this through, I'm not saying otherwise. But these people are not right in the head. And only Jarl has an excuse. I'm just gonna tell you right now, I already have a pretty wacky theory. Like pretty wacky. Solid 9 or 9.5 out of 10. We'll get to it eventually. First, we need to figure out where we start. This chapter begins with Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Road, and they're looking for the keys to Loki's cuffs, which they think is going to be in King Herold's old castle, which has been abandoned for some time. But yeah, I suppose the first surprise is the confirmation that King Herold died 14 years ago. Not really what the community was expecting, but was always a possibility. What was confusing is that we learned in prior chapters that Shanks was the one to deal with Loki 6 years ago. We now have a missing 8-year period in time where we're not entirely sure what Loki was doing. But yeah, some things aren't that complicated, and in this case, we're led to believe, and certainly the giants believe, that Loki killed King Herold, who was this great giant, as well as we get to see in the chapter remnants of other giants that are presumably his guards, also probably other strong giants. Loki killed them all. At that point in time, even if the giants of Elbaf wanted to deal with him, it seems unlikely that they could. So I guess for some amount of time, Loki just became the king of Elbaf, or otherwise stayed there and flipped everyone the bird. But yeah, honestly, this reveal makes a little bit more sense than I think that a lot of people realized, even myself, until I looked into it today. But we kind of already have some context as to when the Lola and Loki marriage happened. In chapter 848, we can see a scene where Lola is talking to Pudding, and Lola's basically like, I'm gonna go find a husband of my own choosing. And it's implied that this moment occurred immediately before Lola abandoned Loki. So in the same panel, we can see Pudding. She looks approximately 6 years old. We know in the current story she is 16 years old. So again, approximately 10 years has passed, which fits snugly in between the time that King Herold died and Loki was captured by Shanks. But there's possibly some information to glean here, because if you recall when we were back in Whole Cake Island talking about the arranged marriage between Lola and Loki, all of the Big Mom pirates referred to Loki as Prince Loki and not King. There's always the possibility we're looking too much into this, right? But just logically speaking, if King Herold had died 14 years ago for Lola is currently 26 years old, is way too early for her to have married anybody. She would have been 12. So by the time that this happened, King Herold was already dead, and Loki was the one to kill him. And whether the other giants of Elbaf liked it or not, Loki had the opportunity, most likely, to declare himself king, which you would think would be the point of killing your own father. Take his power and whatnot. We'll bring this up from time to time, but there's just some things about this chapter that just doesn't seem quite right to me based on what we're being told is the truth. And this is one of those things. In any good murder mystery story, you need a motive. This would be akin to a burglar going into a jewelry store, killing everybody there, but stealing none of the jewelry. The people in the official reports are trying to convince you that this person is a burglar. But using any brain cells whatsoever, you already know that it must be more complicated than that. While we're here though, we have finally met Loki. We have a sense of who this character is. Obviously, some things remain a mystery, but we get the surface level picture, and suddenly the arranged marriage between Lola and Loki, and more specifically, Lola's disinterest in that, makes a lot of sense. At this point, Loki's catchphrase is, I'm gonna destroy the world. It's like his version of saying, I'm gonna be king of the pirates. And just as a nuance of the Big Mom pirates, I'm not sure that everybody really understands. This is like diametrically opposed to what they stand for. Big Mom and the Big Mom pirates fight for it in their own way, but their end objective is peace, prosperity, everyone getting along. Now, because Big Mom is trying to do this, and she believes that she knows best, if you do not listen to her and you do not follow her guidance, hell will come. But it can't be forgotten what they're actually trying to achieve. So really, the recent chapters have clarified and justified why Lola would abandon this marriage. She would effectively take anybody but Loki. Anybody. And I guess it's just a reminder of how Big Mom's controlling nature ultimately undid the Big Mom pirates themselves. She was her own worst enemy. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure when I'll get my next opportunity to say this, or just gonna go ahead and say it. I'm really excited and hopeful for the possibility of the Big Mom pirates involving themselves in Elbaf in any way. I feel as though the Giants have a lot of things to learn. Among that includes Big Mom and the Big Mom Pirates. But another thing that I want to remind you guys of, because it's easy to forget as weeks pass and chapters pass, but I want to remind you of the warning from the adventurer explorer Louis Arnaud. There's something that is dangerous about Elbaf. Previously, we speculated that it could be true that time moves differently in Elbaf, specifically, time moves more slowly. But the reveal that King Herold died 14 years ago pretty much debunks that. Now, I'm not sure that this makes as much sense, but some people did speculate that time could move more quickly in Elbaf. Basically, this would amount to a Strat time skip. Maybe something like that is true. I can't really justify it. I just want to let you guys know that I am in the process of trying to figure out my new headcanon for what exactly the danger of Elbaf is. And this chapter actually gave me a few ideas. To begin with, we continue the chapter and we get a good look of the inside of the Elbaf castle, which has sustained significant damage and is now overrun with foliage. The damage is explained to be the result of Loki and King Herold's fight. More on that later. But the plant activity in this castle is kind of wild if you choose to think too much about it, which is, you guys already know that I am doing that. 14 years has passed since King Herold's death. And in 14 years, plants have overtaken the entire castle, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Guys, a detail that we bring up from time to time, but I think is relevant to know here. We kind of already know what happens to plants when they grow in Sky Islands. Because of the knock-up stream, half of Jaya was knocked up into the Sky Islands. We ended up visiting this Verth, as it was called in Skypiea, and the trees and the creatures there and everything just became overlarge. As for the technicalities of this, I will include a link in the description to a pretty crazy theory, but the idea essentially is that life force is needed in order to create Sky Cloud. So these Sky Islands are full of the energy of life. Also, I do not find it to be a coincidence that in Egghead we learned that Dr. Vegapunk had the Mother Flame, which was like this crazy energy source. And at the same time, the island of Egghead itself was producing Sky Cloud, potentially as a byproduct. Essentially, this is the One Piece equivalent to real-world smog, or I suppose more scientifically accurate, the One Piece version of carbon dioxide, released with the real-world great energy source of fossil fuels. But the interesting fact about carbon dioxide is that plants actually utilize carbon dioxide in order to grow. They eat carbon dioxide and they poop oxygen. So yeah, we're breathing plant poop. Just wanted to make sure you got that full visual. The more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the more plants thrive. Fact. So this takes us back to the insane plant growth that we saw in the part of Jaya that got thrust up into the sky. And this also takes us back to this castle, which in 14 years is now totally overrun by trees, or the branches of Adam or whatever. We even get a perspective to the size of these trees growing within the castle because Road is there. These trees dwarf Road, a giant. And I think that it's fair to assume that 14 years ago, this castle was probably pristine, as you would imagine that a castle should be. So all I'm really trying to say is that we could be looking at a very subtle clue to the dangers of Elbaf. Not that I expect that these strats will grow to giant size over the course of this arc, but there's some chemical here causing this, and it could work out that this is not a good thing. At this point, I expect some people to bring up that we have already visited the Sky Islands, Skypiea, and Upper Yard, and we're not led to believe that there was any danger. So I will complete the theory when we get there. Anyway, our ideas of King Herold were definitely challenged in this chapter, and it's part of what made this chapter kind of difficult to understand. Our impression before was that King Herold was a renowned pacifist. He inspired the entire country of Elbaf to abandon violence, including name-calling. But this chapter wants us to believe that Loki and King Herold had an epic battle inside of this castle, leading to the damage that we can see. Even Zoro comments, this took some serious destructive power. And Rhodes says Loki is a monster, and King Herold was renowned as a great warrior. This damage was inevitable. And we even get to see a portrait of King Herold in the castle, and my guy kind of looks like Kaido. Certainly not the kindly face that I was expecting. I was also kind of expecting, given our impression of giants through Dory and Brogy as well as Hyrule, that, he would be smiling. Nope. So at this point, it is a distinct possibility that King Herold was a fearsome warrior, despite his reputation. And basically, he was a person who did not practice what he preached. Personally, I would find it annoying that Elbaf was inspired by his words while he was not a man of his word. Like, it paints the giants as idiots. But there are a lot of idiots in the story of One Piece. So yeah, just to break it down, I think that there is no chance that Oda is not aware of the perception the community has about King Herold. Therefore, this chapter is a twist. You thought he would be a nice old man? Well, think again. The water is now very muddy. But until we get more, I think I'm going to stick to my guns here. It would be interesting to me if King Herold was known as a great warrior, while also not really fighting. Basically, the damage we see is, supposedly, Loki attacking King Herold and the other giants. King Herold got beat to a pulp and flung through the various structures that we see in the castle, tanking the damage, repeatedly getting back up. So like I said earlier, I like this on one hand because it would just annoy me if the giants of Elbaf were inspired by a guy who was not a man of his word. Do as I say, not as I do. But on the other hand, you have a potential parallel within this chapter. For those that follow a lot of chapter reviews, this is something that I commonly notice, that Oda contains ideas and themes within singular chapters which relate to each other in less obvious ways. In this case, we have commentary on a battle between the supposed pacifist King Herold and his son Loki, which begins to change our perception of the king. And then at the end of the chapter, we see that Loki, although this is occurring because he is restrained, essentially Loki is fighting with members of the God's Knights, while unable to fight back. You have to admit that on one level or another, this would be incredibly fitting. Ironic. The chapter begins with a battle that we could not physically see in real time, and ends with a reenactment, sort of that battle. I also like this idea because it reminds me of Usopp. I am definitely not alone with my belief that Usopp will play a crucial role in Elbaf. And his whole story with Elbaf was his dream of one day becoming a great warrior like the giants. But arc by arc, if you analyze battles Usopp participates in, especially pre-time skip, it mostly is just him getting beaten up. Getting beaten up, but at the same time, getting back up. So if King Herold became known as a great warrior of Elbaf, essentially doing the same thing, the commentary is that Usopp has always been a great warrior, which I just kind of like. But obviously we learn more with each passing chapter, so we'll see. I would circle this as a thing to discuss, but there are still other angles to the pacifism of King Herold. And overall, just a weird, something strange happened here feeling about this place and the battle that occurred here. Even if Herold was a pacifist, we're told by Road that the castle once had numerous guards, and on that day, around 100 of them stood ready to kill Loki. So clearly at this point, violence was not eradicated from Elbaf. In prior reviews, we have questioned the notion that Loki was actually the one responsible for the death of King Herold and his guards. But now we have some pretty compelling evidence that that did in fact occur. So let me just speak plainly. For King Herold to have faked this battle, or framed Loki, or faked his own death, it would require an incredible conspiracy. There's also other theories out there that the world government was somehow responsible for this or involved in this. Again, it seems like it would be difficult to contain the secret, based on the scope of the damage. When I think about things like this, my mind always takes me back to the Water 7 arc. Before the members of CP9 were revealed, we literally saw the dead bodies of Kaku, Lucci, and Khalifa. So before that reveal happened, it was essentially impossible to speculate what was going to happen. This reveal might function the same. From here on until we get something else that's big, it's gonna be really hard to believe that Loki did not kill his father. Basically, you'll have to want to believe it, and ignore the vast majority of the facts. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure of where I actually stand on this at this moment. I think that I have to make decisions on what I choose for my headcanon to be. I like the idea that Loki did not actually kill his father. At the same time, in order to believe that, you would have to believe, basically, that King Herold killed 100 of his guards. That or he planted fake evidence of their death, and the 100 guards and him all went into hiding together and have remained undiscovered for 14 years, which seems like it's a bit much. But I'm also kind of a sucker for the conspiracy. I guess if there's something to hold on to for now as potentially evidence of maybe something about this is weird, is the fact that access to this castle has been restricted for 14 years. They didn't even pick up the bodies and hold funerals. As just a prediction for next chapter, given what we have already seen here, it seems likely that we should find the skeleton of King Herold. That feels like it should be a moment. And if King Herold's body is not here, you should be asking questions. And as just another weird observation, we get to see a lot of skulls, potentially armor, but I don't see any full skeletons, any arms, or any legs. Could just be that Oda decided not to draw it here, or it could be weird. And it's also been mentioned to me that there is a theory that we have already seen King Herold's sword. It's an Elder Jarl's head. The cross guards are the same. Either way, Road confirms that in the 14 years since King Herold's death, no one has come near this castle, and he personally has not been inside of it. I would guess that the only people who have are guards, meaning this event has not been investigated. The rationale that we're given is, evil spirits, which honestly I hope is true. I mean, we're inside the castle, there's supposed to be evil spirits here to actually encounter whatever it is that spook the giants. Like, I want to see that. Inject that straight into my veins. But aside from the evil spirits potentially being real, or something inside the castle creating the impression of evil spirits, which is not actually evil spirits, which would be another fascinating twist, we have this lingering question of why exactly entrance into the castle has been forbidden. Who made that order, and why? So because of their general interest in adventure and chaos, the Strats have stumbled upon an opportunity to actually be the first ones to investigate the scene of the crime. We could potentially learn something which justifies the absurd conspiracy, or not. So potentially something here to keep an eye on. But yeah, it's about this moment that for me, things started getting really strange, in the best way possible. Apparently, some giants naturally have horns, and it was explained to us that this is a product of ancient giant blood. Basically, the way that I took this is that there is the bloodline of continent pullers such as Ors and Ors Jr. within the giants of Elbaf. And furthermore, King Herold once had horns, which he removed from his head by force, leaving some pretty gnarly scars. So yeah, not only does King Herold's expression and general face resemble Kaido, but at one point in the past he also had horns. What is Oda trying to say? Look, I think that there has to be some legitimate reason why King Herold removed his own horns. We're told in the chapter that he did this because he believed that the ancient giants and the ancient giant bloodline was relics of a war-torn past. So I expect this to be true. Giants with horns is a big component of Elbaf's war history. But honestly, let's not stop here, let's get ambitious. We already know that giants have possibly more knowledge than any other country relating to events that occurred in the distant past. And we aren't just talking about the Void Century. The ancient Harley texts contain information revealing that the world was destroyed once before the Void Century as well. Let's go ahead and say it again. Some things are not that complicated. We can try to make it complicated, but it really isn't. We know for a fact that Lunarians were once gods of this world. Lunarians, you know, the people who kind of look like angels. I have a very strong suspicion that at one point in the distant past, it was angels versus demons. What classified one as an angel or a demon? Well, if you had wings, you're an angel, and if you had horns, you're a demon or a devil. I really think that it is that simple. Even in present day, they refer to criminals and pirates as demons, as devils. Members of the Strat get this title. It's pretty common. I wonder if this is a relic of the past when the world fought against devils, literally things that resembled Oni. And I'm not sure that I want to get too specific here, but there's some scattered symbolism in the story of One Piece, shared symbolism, which substantiates this idea. Really old school viewers, like from day one viewers, will know one of the first theory videos I ever made was discussing symbols in One Piece. There are some really common symbols, and we tried to dissect their meaning. And at the time, this was a really long time ago, at the time, one of those symbols was the symbol of the sun. Just by looking at where you find the symbol, we came to the conclusion that this was a symbol associated with Joy Boy and with the family D. This was way before we learned about the sun god. But yeah, there's several symbols that I think are common. And I think that these symbols represent various ideologies or groups from the past. One of these symbols is the symbol of wings. I'm not sure that I can remember every example, but one example is Baroque Works. Why the heck does Baroque Works, an organization created by Crocodile, have a symbol with wings? It straight up doesn't make any sense. We also have the Revolutionary Army. In this case, Dragon, the creator of the Revolutionary Army, is literally named Dragon, so his symbol having wings, it makes more sense, but the symbol is still there. A really fascinating hypothetical to throw out to you is the symbol of the Marines. The arches do resemble wings and flight, another thing which hasn't really ever been explained. But the example that I want to focus on is the symbol of Impel Down. Ironically ruled in the present day, by a bunch of demons. A little known fun fact is that the wings of the jailers of Impel Down are all fake. They literally wear fake wings. So yeah, my theory is basically this. I think that the symbol of Impel Down has not changed over 1,000 years. We now know that the world has flooded by 200 meters, which probably explains how Impel Down was built in the first place. It was built when the world wasn't yet flooded, meaning it's older than 800 years. I believe that this prison was built by the Lunarians, and it carries a symbol associated with them, the symbol of wings. To go back to some of our other examples, it's possible that the Lunarians actually created the organization which eventually became the Marines, and they kept this symbol in some form. Also, if you look really closely at the symbol of the Marines, you'll notice another really strange aspect of it, which is like opposite crescent moons. The Luna in Lunarians means moon. But let's get back to Impel Down. Seems very straightforward to me to speculate that this prison was built originally to house devils. Makes sense to me. Now you may ask, JB, we have a symbol of the Lunarians possibly, but what are the symbol of the devils? Well, you can look at Ors, and you can look at Ors Jr., and come to the conclusion that the symbol of these people is probably this skull and crossbones. I have absolutely no idea where Ors and Ors Jr. came from, like how were these entities even created in the first place without parents? Where are these continent pullers, right? But you look at their designs. They like wearing 3 skulls. And with Ors, you also have the crossed bones. I think that pirates adopted the symbol of the devils. And if that's true, it really starts to make some sense, right? I think that all of this may be a clue to the history of the world before and during the Void Century. This is what King Herold is alluding to with Horns and Elbaf's war-torn past. The Lunarians waged war on the devils. The devils, at least originally, basically included the Oni and the continent pullers and probably anybody who resembled them. And obviously that included the giants of Elbaf, who actually possess this ancient giant bloodline. But I guess while we're here, we can speculate some more. I'm just fascinated by Oda's decision to make King Herold look a lot like Kaido. Also, this reveal makes you think about Loki. Before, I just assumed that Loki wore a helmet with pretty extravagant horns. But given that Loki is the child of King Herold and a pure blood of Elbaf, more on that later, it's feasible that Loki has actual horns. So we did quite an analysis of this in the past, but just the spark notes of it is that Kaido is actually very reminiscent of Joy Boy. And an argument can be made that Kaido eventually intended on becoming Joy Boy. And given what we've already learned in Elbaf, it's even easier to argue that he was a Joy Boy of destruction, just the same as Loki. So guys, we have one Nika of destruction who is literally of the Oni tribe. Onis in Japanese folklore are literally demons. We have a second Nika of destruction who has the bloodline of giant Oni, and in my opinion probably has horns. And we potentially have a third Nika of destruction who possesses the devil fruit. I'm referring to Emu. And if Emu has the devil fruit, then he probably also has horns. This takes us back to Herold's decision to remove his horns and essentially condemn Oni blood in Elbaf. I wonder if the ancient Harley texts or any information that Elbaf possesses suggests that somebody with horns is destined to destroy the world. Or perhaps somebody with horns has destroyed the world, which whether true or not, the giants would conflate with the actions of Nika. Look, I understand that this is highly speculative, but at the same time, I really don't think that I've said anything that crazy. Herold removed his own horns because it disqualified him from being the kind of Nika that he wanted to be. Information overload yet? I sure hope not. Let's continue with the chapter. Road tells us that after the king's death, the country fell into despair, and sadly the one with the biggest grudge against Loki was naturally King Herold's other son, Hirudin. I've said this wrong for so long that I'm sorry guys, I'm not sure that I can change. Hirudin. Anyway, this leads to a conversation about Hirudin where Road kind of explains who he is to the Strats, because they didn't know that Hirudin was Loki's brother. In more detail, we learn that they actually have different mothers. Before marrying the queen, Hirudin was born to a different woman. However, Elbaf would never have recognized Hirudin's mother as its queen in any case, and the Strats ask why. And Road continues that she was born in a different giant country. So there are other countries of giants, which honestly has me pretty hyped up. But we mentioned before about how this chapter got weird. Well, this is the moment. The Strats ask, why does a pure-blooded Elbaf mother matter? They were both giants, right? So Road explains, they were both giants, but you can't talk when you humans kill each other all the time over land. They say having children with a giant from another land taints the blood of Elbaf. So basically, we learn in this chapter that the giants of Elbaf are very bigoted. Which, I mean, man, Oda keeps us guessing, doesn't he? Raise your hands if you predicted this. The only ones raising their hands are liars. But I will say that part of this was actually speculated. This is gonna go over a lot of people's heads, but this actually confirms a really freaking old theory. I'm not sure that I can find the precise panel right now, but I know that Jaguar Jigsaw was talking about the giants of Elbaf at some point. It must have been in Robin's flashback. And he referred to the giants of Elbaf as crude, almost as if he wasn't one of them. So there was already a theory that there were other places that you could find giants. Different giant tribes. Similar to how the Tantata are dwarves, but the Tantata is a very specific tribe of dwarves. Not all dwarves are Tantata. You guys ready for another crazy theory? This whole vibe of Elbaf where the giants are bigoted and pure blood matters is weird. I think it's weird. You guys think that it's weird, right? I can't help but compare this to the royalty in the world of One Piece and the celestial dragons. It seems like similar behavior to me. So, cyclical history in the story of One Piece is all but confirmed. Events over a millennium are repeating themselves. Personally, I think that this reflects Norse mythology. In Norse mythology, you have gods that rule over an age or an era. They corrupt, then a sequence of events known as Ragnarok unfolds, leading to the death of these gods and the destruction of the world. Afterwards, you have a period of void, and then the world is reborn slightly better than what came before. The gods of the current age are obviously the celestial dragons, or humans. The gods that came before them, in my opinion, are the Lunarians. But we know for a fact that the world has already been destroyed twice, meaning that there was gods before the Lunarians. And I would heavily guess that these gods were Oni, or the giants of the Oni, the continent pullers. Basically, guys, I think that the bloodline of the king of the Oni from 2 void centuries ago exists within Elbaf. And this history, although forgotten, has miraculously survived. Elbaf was the home of the celestial dragons during a different age. I bring this up from time to time, but it's just a truth that I feel worthy of sharing, especially because a lot of people parallel the story of One Piece with the real world. But obviously, from the context of the story, reading the pages, a lot of people do not like the celestial dragons. A little bit of an understatement, but yeah. The celestial dragons are evil. Just fess up, a lot of fans have had the thought that, you know what, it might not be a bad thing if all the celestial dragons just died. Might not be a bad thing. Well guys, you're in luck, because in most universes, that is what happens. We've actually seen this to some extent already with the story of Doflamingo. Homing left Mary Joie, he went to some peaceful island somewhere, and the accumulated atrocities of these celestial dragons were then applied to him, and they were mercilessly attacked and eventually killed. But as you know, history is repeating, and basically I think that this was the fate of the gods of prior ages. Why is King the last Lunarian? Because the people killed all of the Lunarians. In the current story, why have we met only one continent puller? Because all the continent pullers were killed as well. We speculated earlier about angels and demons. The Lunarians were the angels and the current gods. They hunted the demons or the devils. Why did they do that? Because they were the corrupt gods that came before them. Guys, it is not a coincidence that Oda takes the time to create good celestial dragons like Homing or Don Quixote Mosgard. It's not a coincidence that the only continent puller that we have met in the current story is Ors Jr., possibly the sweetest being that exists. It is not a coincidence that the Strat crew and the Grand Fleet is building in such a way that you know that every single race and tribe will be represented and become Luffy's friend. With Luffy, I believe that the cycle will end. But if it does not, in the next age, they will hunt the celestial dragons. And because these celestial dragons are human, the world will hunt humans. Maybe a good time to bring up a quote related to Robin. It is not a crime to simply exist. Or contextually, events relating to Ace. Child bears no responsibility for the sins of his father. So yeah, I'm pretty well convinced that the giants of Elbaf contain the bloodline of former gods of the world. That alone would make all of this make complete sense. But while we're here, I would also speculate that the giants might actually be missing some important history. I really don't think that the Lunarians, the celestial dragons, and the continent pullers are the only gods to have existed in the world of One Piece. I think before the continent pullers, the gods of One Piece were dragons. And that is also another history that, although forgotten, has not been lost. There are clues here or there. So I actually think that the world has already been destroyed 3 times. I'll save the explanation for another time, just something for you guys to chew over and think about as you're trying to process all the information. This is a good theory. And also, what an awesome visual. Continent pullers fighting dragons in a bygone era. Straight up Godzilla level storytelling. It's also kind of interesting because King Herold in the chapter wears armor, which looks kind of like scales, which is part of why he reminds me of Kaido. Makes you wonder if these former gods stole the title of dragon, kind of like the celestial dragons. Oda is literally layering thousands of years of history in the modern age. Cleverly concealed but there. But let's get back to the chapter. Zoro asks, why join Herold's crew if you think he has tainted blood? And we get a mini flashback of Rode as a child being bullied because he liked to draw maps. They called him a nerd. Even the diorama, we know that Rode built that, and he was basically playing with toys. And Herold was the only one that saw the value in this, which seems true even today. The other member of Herold's crew don't seem to like Rode all that much. He's still creepy and weird. So Rode continues, he was always so earnest and straightforward, unlike me. He never lived in the castle growing up. His father may have been king, but his mother was ostracized. He endured a lot and still said this: one day I'm going to unite all the giant tribes. In other words, I'm going to be king of the giants. And Rode says, I want to make his dream a reality. So yeah, just the characterization of Herold and Rode. Rode in this chapter, I know that a lot of fans are going to really struggle with this because they hate Rode, because like the actual giants of Elbaf, they also think that he's creepy and weird because it's kind of true. But he's not a bad guy. And what is happening is he is literally being bullied. So y'all gotta figure that one out for yourselves. Either way, the whole concept of multiple giant tribes and Herold being the guy to bring them all together, I just love it, truly. This is also probably something that we can flesh out to some degree already. Going back to Herold's mother and her illegitimacy to become the queen of Elbaf, Rode explains, yes, they were both giants, but you can't talk when you humans kill each other all the time over land. So why are there multiple giant tribes and why are they not united? It seems straightforward to speculate that the giants have been fighting over Elbaf for a very long time. You can even make more specific speculations, like sometime in the last 100 or 1,000 years, there was a giant that attempted to become the king of Elbaf and had some sort of faction. This giant or this faction was defeated and then banished from Elbaf. Thus, a new giant village was born. Essentially, many giants throughout the course of history have some idea of how Elbaf should be ruled and what Elbaf should be like. So leadership in Elbaf over time was determined by strength, which is something I feel like Kaido would agree with. But yeah, while Rode was explaining his relationship with Herold, Zoro was listening attentively, and at the conclusion says that kind of boring motivation is nothing new to me, and he looks disappointed. So I guess this confirms what we speculated at the end of the last chapter review. Zoro is hankering himself for a fight. He wants to fight the legendary giants of Elbaf. He wants some excuse, any excuse. And considering the wild rabbit hole that we just jumped down, this couldn't make any more sense, right? We've basically called the giants of Elbaf former gods of the world, who potentially referred to themselves as dragons. Come on now. Also, this joke is hilarious and is absolutely going to get the Strats into some kind of trouble. But I suppose we can finally circle back and finish a theory that we mentioned, what is it now, 25 minutes ago? I wanted to remind you of Louis Arnott's warning about the dangers of Elbaf, and the chapter gave me a few ideas. So while Zoro wanting to fight is not new, and a desire to take out legendary beings to prove his strength isn't that crazy, it feels like Zoro is a bit unhinged relative to how we normally perceive him. I don't remember him being this aggressive in Wano, the island of swordmasters, as an example. Elbaf has a very long history of war. Likewise, Upper Yard in Skypiea, the moment that it landed there, also had a very long history of war. I'm just wondering out loud, but I wonder if something here is innately creating aggression. While very much science fiction-y, at the same time there could be some chemical relating to the land in the sky islands, that has an effect. Things like this remind me of the steroids that we learned about in Fishman Island. If you remember, the steroids were what was in the Tamate Bako box, which was the national treasure of Fishman Island. Given what we've learned recently, it is now very obvious that this was a national treasure because it transformed Fishman into Nika-like beings. They became white like Nika. Hody Jones, another Nika of destruction. But yeah, a side effect of the steroids is it seemed to heighten aggression. We should also not forget about Mink Sulong. Sulong transformed into white Nika beings, also crazed and bloodthirsty. This is also true of the children of Punk Hazard, given some kind of chemical which made them giant and also incredibly aggressive. Do you guys see what I'm saying? The idea that there is some kind of chemical or particle just present in Elbaf which inspires aggression wouldn't be unprecedented. But if you don't like this theory, it is also possible that Zoro is just simply dissatisfied with his performance in Egghead and is desperate to get stronger. Either way, joke or not, I feel like Oda's got something for Zoro in this arc, and I'm here for it. But yeah, this takes us to the end of the chapter. Once again, Loki and the members of the Gods' Knights. It's revealed that Gunko possesses the Arrow fruit and is utilizing it to beat the absolute crap out of Loki. This arrow fruit is wild. Gunko explains that these arrows show the trajectory of my future and the outcome is unavoidable. It's like the swift attack from Pokemon, it can't miss. And I'm over here trying to wrap my mind about how exactly that would work. I guess my impression is that Gunko has the ability to project her actions so far into the future that you couldn't even use the arrows to predict what she will do next, because the arrows would be everywhere. But it still feels like somehow this devil fruit locks a future into place. Otherwise, the attacks would be avoidable. This feels like the superior version of Foxy's fruit. You might as well not be moving, but in this case, we do not need a special beam to land. It also feels like a quintessential One Piece devil fruit for combat. I know that a lot of people want One Piece to be Hunter x Hunter, but it is not Hunter x Hunter. Battles in One Piece are almost entirely about will. Oftentimes, it boils down to the heroes taking an obscene amount of damage, while doing damage to their opponent, and whoever taps out loses. So if Gunko's attacks are inevitable, then this is the kind of fight that is being set up. Personally, I think that it would be a wasted opportunity if Gunko did not fight somebody who possessed Future Sight Haki. It seems designed to nullify that ability. So Luffy versus Gunko incoming? There'll end up being a trick to this fruit that Luffy or anyone else will eventually figure out. But until the ability is understood, I think that somebody is in for a wake-up call. And we don't even know what the other God Knight can do yet. But yeah, this is probably a good transition to another reveal of the chapter, which is the identity of the Shanks doppelganger. It's not Shanks, it's Figureland Shamrock, the son of Figureland Garling, and the current captain of the Gods' Knights. Not gonna lie guys, the first time that I heard the name Shamrock, I kind of laughed. Not entirely sure that Oda cooked with that one, but I kind of get the logic. I mean, like, we see Figureland Shamrock, he looks pretty much identical to Shanks. At this point in time, we already know that this is either Shanks' twin brother or a clone of Shanks, or Shanks is a clone of Figureland Shamrock. Or they're both clones of Figureland Garling. Basically, they are the same person, but with different backstories. There is no doubt. So for one to be named Shanks, you know, like he got shanked, and the other one to be named Shamrock, like Lucky Shamrock, born a privileged celestial dragon, I feel like that was the thought process. But yeah, calling this dude Shamrock is gonna be a struggle. I'm still not entirely sure about how I feel about all of this, but you have to acknowledge that this family is pretty OP. Figureland Garling, the former captain of the Gods' Knights, is now officially a member of the Gorosei. He earned this title. His son is the new captain of the Gods' Knights. And his other son, which I guess was abandoned or whatever, is a Yonko. Like, holy crap. This might be the first family in One Piece which could rival the Monkey D family. I think that they still lose, but we're talking elite bloodline. This has me desperate to know the role that the Figureland family had during the Void Century. But I suppose that's the vast majority of what there is to talk about here with the end of the chapter. In the last chapter, we got the impression that they were here to recruit Loki as a member of the Gods' Knights, but this one clarifies it. That was just one aspect of why they were here. The real objective is to conquer the island of Elbaf. And I'm just thinking to myself, man, if you had chosen any day before this one, like literally a week ago, you know, a month ago, 2 years ago, at any point, right, you could have actually done that. But you just had to wait for good old Monkey D to show up. You have chosen unwisely. For now, though, I'm very excited to see what eventually happens. It appears as though the Gods' Knights are done with Loki and will be leaving soon. And also some dialogue possibly suggests that they believe that Loki will die. So it doesn't seem like we're setting up for an imminent battle between them and the Strats. But this is where the Strats are heading. They will find Loki and they might potentially save his life. It might actually require them to remove his handcuffs in order to save his life. He probably needs a doctor, which is complicated in the best way. This is one of those situations which tests your morals. Would you risk danger to yourself to save the life of your enemy? I'm pretty sure that the Giants of Elbaf will have strong feelings about this idea. It feels like Elbaf has been fire from day one. But yeah, I think that's all that I have to say today. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're interested, check out my book, The Booms. Link is in the description. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.